Welcome to the Brazil International Talk Show. I'm Suzanne Thorson, and we are a team of Brazilian and Hispanic entrepreneurs living in South Florida. Our goal is to discuss subjects of interest between the Brazilian Hispanic communities and facilitate partnerships within the United States. First, I'll ask the hosts to introduce themselves. Aloysio Vasconcellos, please. Please unmute your mic. It's muted, Aloysio. You just have to click to unmute.
Are you okay now? All right, I'm Aloysio Vasconcellos, and I'm the chairman of the Brazil International Foundation, a group of Brazilians and Americans established in 10 years ago. And previously I was a banker in New York. I worked for Citibank. I was a corporate VP. And also I spent some time in academics, and I have a consulting business located here in Boca Raton.
Great, thank you. Now, can you mute again your mic, please? Thank you. Now, please, Sol Gonzalez.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sol Gonzalez. I am the CEO for the Hispanic Entrepreneur Initiative based in Boca Raton, Florida, and we are an agent of change in the community by joining with Hispanic entrepreneurs, diplomatic corps, agencies of economic development, and other entrepreneurs and corporations to empower Hispanic entrepreneurs to create diverse, sustainable businesses in the U.S. by providing training and mentoring opportunities. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, our very special subject expert will say some words of herself. Renata, please. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. My name is Renata Urban, and I'm the owner and founder of Urban Training and Services. I am a language teacher, an intercultural coach, and a communication skills trainer. So basically, what I do is I help people communicate successfully in their own language, in a foreign language, and across cultures.
And I'm Suzanne Thorson, founder and creative director of Brazilian Beat. I also provide artistic and cultural advice to the Brazil International Foundation, and I'm part of the event committee of the Brazilian Business Group. So today our subject is cross-cultural communication. I'm gonna pass the word to Renata, please. She's gonna present and guide us through before we begin the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you find the input interesting for your audience. As you can see, I want to talk about intercultural communication today, but also what that means in terms of communicating successfully in business in the US in English. So first of all, a little bit about myself, a little bit more than what I just said. And that has to do with my cultural background, just to understand where I'm coming from, why I became a language teacher and an intercultural coach. It basically has to do with the way how I grew up. So I was born in Germany, but I grew up in Germany and in England. So from a very early age on, I was fortunate enough to experience two very different cultures and to learn two very different languages from the get-go. I also lived and worked in Italy, so that's yet another culture and another language that I've acquired. And then I've been living in the United States for more than a decade. So I'd say those four countries, languages, cultures have predominantly shaped who I am. But as a language learner and teacher, as somebody who's experienced different cultures from the get-go, I have worked with people from many different countries and cultures over my lifetime. And this has essentially contributed to the fact that I studied linguistics and business. So I have a linguist and a business background. I'm a language teacher, mainly for those languages. I'm also an intercultural and a diversity coach. I am a communication skills trainer. And I sometimes work as a translator because I do consider English and German both my native languages, and it's kind of easy for me to go back and forth between those two languages. So that's just a little bit of background so you understand where I'm coming from. But let's talk about intercultural communication. So how does that work? You have a sender and you have a receiver. Between them, they pass messages that are encoded and decoded. And in between, there are channels, filters, personalities, egos, self-image, pathos, logos, ethos, many different things that make it really difficult to understand the message. Now, once the message is received and decoded, the receiver turns into the sender turns into the receiver, and the entire process starts all over again. Now, you would think this is already difficult enough, kind of a balancing act for communicating, understanding other people, what they want, what they mean, how to negotiate with them. But now throw in the element of culture, and you're making this a rather volatile situation. This is basically what intercultural communication is about. It is the already difficult field of communication with the added difficulty of culture. Now, what is culture? I think it's very important to understand how we can define it. And here's some hints on what plays an important role in this. So you could say that culture is what we have subconsciously acquired, what we're used to, and what we have learned to navigate. And very importantly, it doesn't matter how much we agree or disagree with it, because these patterns, norms, and behaviors are recognized, reinforced, and rewarded by the group we belong to. And obviously, non-compliance is often frowned upon or punished. So this is very important to understand how you could define culture, because if you become aware of your own culture, what is it that you have subconsciously acquired, that you do kind of naturally, that you feel very comfortable with because you're used to it, or what you don't feel comfortable with, but you've learned to navigate it. You just know how to do it because it's so commonplace. And you will realize that those patterns, those norms, those behaviors, remember those three words, they're recognized, reinforced, and rewarded. That's usually what happens. So if you don't behave like this, people don't recognize what you mean, why you're doing it. Nobody gives you the feeling that this is the right behavior. It's not reinforced. And of course, it's not rewarded. On the contrary. So bear this in mind, as this is a definition of culture, and this is what you experience when you work with other cultures. Now, there are also different layers of culture that I want to point out to you. When we say culture, we often understand national culture, the culture of the United States, the culture of Brazil, the culture of other countries. But on top of that, we also have regional cultures. Not all the United States is the same. Not every US American is the same. People are very different. So you have to take regional culture into consideration. There's also professional and educational culture. If you work at a university, if academia is your area of expertise, you might find that people have a very different culture from, let's say, an engineering manufacturing company, or a lawyer, or the financial sector. So professional and educational culture is also what shapes our behavior and communication style. But there's more. There's gender and ethnic and class culture. There's religious and philosophical culture. There's generational culture. Age plays a major role. There's corporate culture, and there's our personal culture, our personality. So we belong to many different groups, but the visible behavior we see is a combination of our own personality, the culture we grew up in or that we've become accustomed to over years, and the circumstances. That's what we always have to take into consideration when communicating with other people. Now, it's also a question of perception. Look at these two pictures. That will give you an idea of what I mean by question of perception. Now, if you're the person on that island, okay, let's imagine it's a little bigger in reality, but you've been stuck on that island forever and you see a boat. What do you think? From that perspective, the boat is rescue. The boat means you can finally get off the island. You can leave. But what does it look like from the boat? You've been on a boat for a long time. Finally, there's land. So it's a question of perspective. From what angle are we looking at a situation or at communication? Or a quote by Dr. Bruce Lipton that I like very much is, the moment you change your perception is the moment you rewrite the chemistry in your body. You're looking at something here at a bee, but it's easily transferable to business behavior, communication style, what people say and do in your everyday life. You see that behavior, you hear those words. What do you feel? What do you think? Like in the case of the bee, do you think, oh, beautiful, honey, delicious? Or do you think, oh my gosh, poison, dangerous? What are your initial thoughts? And you really have to take that into consideration when communicating with other cultures. How do you perceive others' behavior, others' words? Do you react positively or negatively to it? Why? Because maybe you're not used to it, because maybe it's not recognized, reinforced, and rewarded. Well, I'll give you some things to think about. Perception is what we see and what we want to see. We look at culturally recognized, reinforced, and rewarded behavior. We tend to associate with people who behave in familiar ways. And any deviation from that behavior is often regarded as suspicious. Now, I just want to give you 3 more examples on perception. Will help you how to communicate better. If you see somebody with crossed arms, what does it mean? Does it mean the person is angry? Does it mean the person is confident? Or does it mean that the person is a good listener? Depending on the culture and also the professional culture, crossed arms may have all of those meanings and may be used as a way to communicate that with body language. But how did you perceive it? That's the question. Or time. Time is a very delicate matter between cultures. Can you actually be too early? Is such a thing possible? In some cultures, that's not possible because you can never be too early. Early is good. Or what is on time? Is 5 minutes early on time? Is on time, or is 5 minutes after on time? What is on time? How do we define that? Or when does it start to be too late? Very different perceptions about that as well. And another example is eye contact. If somebody's not looking at you, is not looking you straight into the eyes when they're communicating with you, what does that mean? Is the person shy? Is the person dishonest? Or is the person respectful? How do you personally feel about it? This is a question of perception and it's a question of culture, and it depends on what is recognized, reinforced, and rewarded in a particular culture. And remember, culture is not only national culture. Remember the little pyramid of the layers of culture. It can also mean that this is recognized, reinforced, and rewarded in your professional culture, or in your national or in your generational culture. Well, I wanted to give you some practical examples, especially because we're talking about South and Central American countries, the Latino business world, and the United States, and entrepreneurs starting businesses here. So I picked 3 situations as far as communication or intercultural communication is concerned. So imagine those two trying to do business with each other. And we have one person saying, okay, come on, let's sign the contract so that we can start working on our project. That sounds fair enough and a normal business practice, right? But maybe the other person is thinking, how can I trust your signature when I don't even know you? So the question is, how much do people need to know each other to feel safe doing business with each other? That is a huge thing to consider when doing business with the US, because very often in the US, people don't really need to know you to feel comfortable doing business with you as long as you sign the contract. Another situation might be this. See the situation here? So the boss on the phone has a visitor, the guy sitting down with the papers and the briefcase, but he's on the phone. He says, excuse me just a moment. His secretary is in there. She wants him to sign papers. Another visitor is arriving. So what's the visitor's thinking? What do you think he's thinking? Well, this might be something he's thinking. How impolite. He's dealing with all these people during our appointment. This is not going to work. What an unreliable business partner. So consider that in the US, this might be a thought of the person, of the visitor, because when we have a meeting, we kind of expect exclusivity for that period of time that we scheduled and nothing else. Well, I want to give you another example. Business lunch. What do you understand by business lunch? Well, of course, we could talk about the food first. A lot of people I know, especially from Brazil and Colombia, they keep complaining about the food culture here. Somebody once said, can you imagine they had sandwiches for lunch? And I said, yes, I can. I absolutely can imagine. So we might have very different expectations about what constitutes good food for lunch or for dinner. But more importantly, what do we talk about when we meet somebody for, let's say, a business lunch? Now, this person might say, how's your family? Do you like living here? Florida's wonderful. Oh, you look beautiful today. How would somebody in the US react to that? Probably not very favorably, because how's your family? Well, that's none of your business. Do you like living here? Yes, sure, but we're not going to talk about Florida, right? Florida's wonderful. Yeah, sure. Can we move on? You look beautiful. Wow, how dare you? None of your business either. You might get reactions like this. And you might hear questions like, did you have a good flight? How many trucks does your company need? What specific features were you looking for? So all of a sudden we turn to business so quickly without the need to really get to know the other person. That is also a perception of what is common, of what is recognized, reinforced, and rewarded in a culture. Okay, after those examples, and I hope I have still time to give you a few more pointers and something that I've kind of found out over the years, living here in the US, especially in Florida, and working with a lot of Brazilians. I came up with my own US American Brazilian field study because I hear what Brazilians often say about US Americans. They often tell me their happiness and their frustration. And I talk to US Americans who work with Brazilians, and they also tell me what they're very happy about and their frustrations. So I thought you might find it very interesting to share that with you. So this is my own personal experience. I just want to point that out. It's not a US study or anything. It's my own personal experience, what people have told me over the years. So let's start with US American perceptions of Brazilians. And I specifically want to say some, because it's some people who've told me that. So they say that Brazilians are always happy, that they're easygoing, so they're very impressed with that, very friendly and chatty, so they find it easy to communicate at first, but then they also feel like they tend to be overdressed or inappropriately dressed. And we can talk about later how you feel about this statement, where it might come from. That they're only here to enjoy themselves, that they're not serious about business, and that they often have bad English. And because of that, and that's an incorrect assumption, but people do tend to have that assumption, they're not well educated. This is all good stuff to talk about later if you want to. Now, how about the Brazilian perceptions of US Americans? Most of them tell me that they love that they're very efficient and well educated, and they love that everything works. They also find it interesting that Americans tend to be extremely confident, but they don't like that they don't mean what they say. They're not really interested in me as a person. There are too many rules. Sometimes US Americans are too casual and exhibit bad manners, and they absolutely don't speak other languages. Of course, there are many exceptions, but this is what some of them feel. Now, leading from this into how to communicate, let's establish a few guidelines and recommendations. So, how to communicate with US Americans and with Brazilians. And these are contrasting statements. So, for example, it is absolutely advisable to get to the point quickly and to keep it short and simple. The kind of for dummies style works very well in business with US Americans. Now, for Brazilians, I would say give some more background information and a justification why, and you can absolutely make it personal. Then, for US Americans, tell them what you are going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. This is the golden rule of presenting in the US. It's almost too for dummies style, and it is often very different from a Brazilian presentation style where you might feel more free to digress and make erratic topic changes, and you can do this to keep the conversation interesting. Whereas for US Americans, you keep it streamlined, you keep it simple and to the point. Also, brevity, clarity, and summarizing is important, whereas circular storytelling is definitely more welcome by Brazilians. You can focus on facts and keep the emotions low, whereas with Brazilians, you can also focus on facts, but emotions are not as much of an issue as they often are with US Americans. Well, I got a bit more. Here is another one. Allow time for questions and answers to be prepared and say things very directly multiple times. Again, I could have repeated dummy style, but this is what works really well. Yes, you already said it once. Say it again twice and say it again a third time. Summarize, say it again. That's perfectly fine. And people will have questions at the end. So allow some time for questions and answers. Whereas maybe in your own culture, saying things not so explicitly and it is necessary and things are more understood without words. In US American business culture, especially if you're giving a presentation, use the application first approach. And don't cover everything. Leave room for questions to continue the conversation afterwards. So application first approach means tell me what it is, what it's good for, what the result is. Make it quick and fast and to the point. And then afterwards, you might add a few details because then I can tune out if I'm not interested anymore. So give me the interesting stuff first and then the rest next. Whereas over the years, I've come to the conclusion that Brazilians prefer a more comprehensive principle first style where more things are prepared and explained before you kind of come to the result at the end. And the questions are often asked and answered in a more informal dialogue and not so much as an official Q&A session at the end. Here's one more slide that I have. So with US Americans, you should avoid complimenting women on their looks, figure, body, or hair. If you must, well, instead, make compliments on their clothes, shoes, or design choice. That is always welcome. Whereas with Brazilian women, my experience is, and please, let's discuss this afterwards, what your personal perception is, that don't really mind if you compliment them on looks, figure, body, hair, as long as it's tasteful in words, and as long as you don't combine it with touching. And with US Americans, when you say, how are you? You can say, how are you? Or like your shoes. That's fine. See, you're complimenting on shoes, not something on the body. So I like your shoes. I read your article. It was very interesting. These are good small talk topics, and you need to try to keep it superficial. As far as small talk goes, with Brazilians, you may even ask, are you married? How's your family? What are you doing this afternoon? I do not recommend that you say what are doing this afternoon in small talk situations with US Americans. They might get suspicious and get like, why are you asking me that? So there might be different ideas of what is a good small talk topic as well. Okay, I got one more. So this is obviously pre-COVID, when we meet one-on-one. So as we start meeting in person again, touching is not as welcome with you as Americans. They need some space, and you need to keep eye contact, and you need to stay focused on the conversation, which is very different in cultures where physical proximity and touching is important. But again, that is something we don't need to worry about for now with the COVID situation. As far as criticism, negative feedback goes, in the US, it must be sandwiched between praise and positive feedback. It's right in the middle. You cannot just say what's on your mind. You cannot just give the negative feedback. You have to wrap it in a lot of positivity. Whereas I feel, at least in a more private and trusted environment, it can be expressed more freely among Brazilians. And being on time is very important. And then, of course, in other places, time is more flexible. Now, here are some final recommendations for the language when you communicate with Americans. Get used to sports jargon. They love that. For example, things like you have to step up to the plate. Oh, this was a home run, a slam dunk. Or they can cut to the wire. We should make a game plan. We're on the right track. And wow, that's the knockout round. Things like that are used in business, have very specific meaning, are used all the time, but they're considered sports jargon. You'll hear that all the time. That is something you should probably make yourself familiar with. Then a lot of idiomatic expressions like to cut to the chase, to face the music, to bite the bullet, to go all out, or to pull the plug. Just a few examples of what an idiomatic expression is. US Americans use them all the time. And if you don't know what it means, that might also make conversation more difficult. Another thing that a lot of people complain to me about is the use of acronyms. It's everywhere, like FYI, for your information, ASAP, as soon as possible, AKA, meaning known as, or PDA, personal display of affection, TMI, too much information, and so on. Lots of these acronyms that are used that you might find weird, or that, let's say, especially in business, people expect you to be familiar with. And as a language teacher, I've realized even at a very, very high level of proficiency in English, many learners or non-native speakers of English have trouble with so-called phrasal verbs. A phrasal verb is something like to put up with, to get away with, to look for, to look after, and so on. These are expressions you also want to look into to feel more comfortable communicating with native speakers of English. All right, so what are some solutions to summarize and to come to an end here? Making incorrect assumptions can be very harmful and misleading on both sides. So think of other reasons why this person behaves this way. Go beyond the what you see, and ask why. Why are people behaving this way? Why are they communicating this way? This will help you, and also balance your speaking and your listening. There are different communication styles like direct, indirect, expressive, restrained, task-focused, relationship-focused, or polychronic, monochronic preferences, and many more. So these are called cultural dimensions. This is what I teach in my workshops and in my coaching. It's also very useful to make yourself familiar with these different types of behavior and communication styles. But what is the baseline for being successful? Well, if you have a certain attitude, curiosity, and openness, if you acquire certain skills and knowledge, and if your adaptability is high, then you have the best chances of being successful in another culture. What I understand by attitude, curiosity, and openness are those things like self-reflection, willingness to listen, watch and learn, patience, empathy, tolerance, appreciation of difference, and sense of adventure. If somebody possesses this attitude and has this kind of curiosity and openness, their probability of being successful at communicating internationally is very high. There's also a lot of what that you can learn. You can study things about other cultures. Once you've become aware of your own culture, you can study another culture and compare. You can learn how to have good communication skills in general. You can acquire that knowledge, learn about customs, values, norms, beliefs, and do this gap analysis. So there's a lot that can be studied as well. And as far as adaptability is concerned, the willingness to adapt and change, and the flexibility, the high emotional, the EQ, the ability to work with ambiguity and uncertainty and to see the why beyond the what. These are the skills and abilities that will make you successful when communicating across cultures. So that's the little part that is my presentation, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
I have no words to express how fantastic your presentation. Thank you so much. I understand that you work with businesses, right? And training organizations, relocation firms, and private individuals to help them communicate successfully in their own language, in other language, and across cultures, right? So it's so much to learn, Renata. I'm sure all of us are thrilled of having you here today, because I was like, everything that you were saying about Brazilian, I was like, exactly, exactly.
Thank you.
We all like had this in our everyday life. I'm sure that we are constantly learning. And just as an example, Brazilian Beat, my live entertainment group, we have 3 presentations at American Heritage School this coming Friday. And the first thing that I said to the one that is a woman that came to, show me the campus is, "Oh, how beautiful your eyes." Because the eyes were really stunning. And she really did a face, like you said, like Why are you? So we don't notice sometimes, and we don't mean anything about it, and we really have to pay attention because it comes across, not like a business professional relation. You're
A
absolutely
lot of people come to me and say, well, I have the best of intentions,
right.
and we all humans are the same. Isn't that enough? Unfortunately, it's not.
Mhm. And we do have to learn constantly because now with the globalization, like the world is like you have all the cultures living together. And I also feel, correct me if I'm wrong, that Americans also have to be a little open to understand that since this person is from another culture, what does she mean with that? Because probably she didn't mean anything. So I'm sure.
Absolutely. I work with a lot of US Americans, and I'm trying to teach them exactly that. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure all of us always hear, what do you mean? Why? Because it's better that you ask like this and the person has the chance to. So, well, let's begin the Q&A because I'm sure all of us has a ton of things to ask. Let's start with Aloysio Vasconcellos, please.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great presentation, and I feel that it was important to me because I spent most of my international career dealing with international people, either in their own countries or here in the States or in Brazil. Uh, I, I, I see that people that come from Brazil and other countries as well to do business, to live here, when they come, the first thing they do, of course, is to learn the language. And they think that that's it. Once they learn the language, they will be able to live here, adapt, and contribute, and so forth and so on. But we know that it's not only this. What you just told us is that it's very important. And we don't see people talking about that. It's not, although obvious when we talk about. There is no, this is not spread out. So in other words, you have to learn the language, but this is part of your customs and your life. You don't just speak the language and have a different sensibility and position yourself in different ways that are, aggressive and not just aggressive. Sometimes you miss opportunities because you are not, you don't say something. Can you elaborate a little bit about this?
well, when you enter a new country or a new market, you always should do some research and you should be prepared. So it's nothing different here, that you would obviously do some research. What is common? Who could I partner with? Maybe have a partner when you're setting up a business here who has been established here for a much longer time. Having a bridge, a guide, is always very helpful. As far as the US is concerned, I always tell people, be very careful with the legal side of things. Law and order is something not to mess with in the United States. There are many legal pitfalls. So you might need a lot of advisors to help you as a business consultant, a lawyer, an accountant, and so on. There are many professional areas to navigate that you could use your business partner or your go-to bridge, your contact for. But what I mainly talk about, and that's my business obviously, is the intercultural communication side of things, is that before you're setting up a business here, you should really learn how to deal with everyday business situations. You should look into situations such as prospecting, sales, negotiating, how it is done. Like, how do you schedule meetings? How do you write agendas? How seriously are people with deadlines? Learn about how agreeing and disagreeing is done, decision-making, problem solving, especially giving negative feedback and conflict management. It's a very important skill, how to handle that. And if you have your own employees, how to lead and motivating employees here, or especially if you have a diverse international team, how to work with that international team is very important. And above all, how to build trust and relationships. I can't emphasize this enough, that we feel that we all build trust and relationships in the same way, but we don't. There are many different factors that play into that. And before you can start doing business with someone, you need to establish trust and a relationship. It's just being done in a very different way in different cultures.
Exactly. Marisol, would you have any question?
Yes, thank you, Renata, for that amazing presentation, as usual. As Renata mentioned, you are so right. There are so many layers to culture. And to understand, I wanted to add first that setting up a meeting, something that works really well for us when dealing with an American person or corporation, is to send an agenda before the meeting that sets the expectations and brings the stress a little bit down, because people know what that meeting is going to be about and how is it going to go. It doesn't have to be totally inflexible, but it gives the person something to work with and be prepared for that meeting. So sending an agenda prior to the meeting, once you have established there is going to be a meeting, this is the topic and this is what we're going to deal with, facilitates the communication and starts, I believe, building that relationship and that trust, because you know the other person is coming with the cards on the table, to say so. One of the layers of culture is now many corporations are dealing not only with different ethnicities, but different generations, sometimes even 3 generations working on the same corporation. That has its own set of challenges and rewards. Do you have anything to say on that topic, Renata?
Yes, and thank you for referring to that little pyramid I showed about the layers of culture, and generation or age was one of them. It does distinguish and divide us just as much as national culture or corporate culture. It just defines who we are, and we identify with an age group that we belong to. And it's not just age. So in total, I would say we belong to 10 to 15 different cultural groups. And you saw all of them, from regional to professional culture, gender, ethnic culture, and the generational culture, exactly. So this, and on top of that, we have our personality. So it doesn't mean that if you have two 40-year-olds that they're identical just because they belong to the same age group. They could be very different, because there's personality and the other layers of culture. And at the same time, you could have a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old, and they feel like they're like sisters or like brothers. They feel so the same because they have so much in common. So age is just as much as a dividing factor, or yet despite age we can connect. But how do we work with this? How do we overcome those variations? I always say diversity is a gift, and it's also a vulnerability, because unless you manage diversity well, it can end in disaster. And it's any type of diversity, and age or generations is just one of them. So what I do is usually I use a tool called Global Disc. It's an assessment of personality and culture. And when I say culture, I mean all these layers of culture, so that people can develop an understanding of their preferences, of their behavior, of their communication style, and they can realize what other preferences and what other communication styles other people in the company have. It helps them broaden their understanding, their vision, their mindset, and in the end, it helps them to stretch their comfort zone. Because the reason why we don't like other people, why we feel uncomfortable with other people who are different, is because there's some sort of fear or pain or discomfort. But if we discover what what is the reason or the source of that discomfort. And if we stretch our comfort zone and try to understand why the other person is like that, and work around it or work with it, that's when we can start working together successfully. And this is what I would recommend for companies to do, to look into different tools and sources to turn the volatility of their diverse workforce into a strength and into a benefit by strengthening their understanding of differences and preferences and by widening their comfort zone.
Fantastic. I noticed that advertising through direct communication on newspapers and magazines always was the way to go. However, this traditional and somehow efficient way to communicate with the public in general changes with time, right? In today's world, what would you consider the most efficient and economic manner to approach the market, thus improving the presence of a small business operation in the local market?
Well, whenever I speak about the US and the cultural classification, I would refer to it as a linear, active, task-focused culture. It's not a multi-active, people-focused culture, but despite that, over the years, I have come to the conclusion that even in the United States, working with people, doing business with actual people has become much more important than just analyzing markets. So the way how I feel it is today is that people want to feel that they're being personally addressed and they want to enjoy as much service as they can possibly get, of course, at a competitive price. But the personal approach is very important. This is why business networking and social media activity has become so essential for doing marketing and for interacting with potential new clients. But what you have to create, and that's often hard for other cultures, is kind of, I call it warm and fuzzy feeling on the surface without too much depth. The warm and fuzzy feeling, it's like you have to make everybody feel like they're your best friend, but they're not. This is a very, very difficult balancing act, and it might feel strange or even insincere to new arrivals to the US, but it's the key to reach your audience here in the US. Also, I would say that customers do not trust businesses that have zero reviews or client testimonials. To read what other people say about this business is extremely important. Also, something that I had to learn is you have to give away a lot of things for free to find customers. So it is very commonplace to provide free consultations, free samples, free memberships, free webinars, basically free anything to bring potential new customers in because they want to see you in action. They want to experience you. Only then, if they're convinced you're the right person for them to work with or you have the right product for them to buy, then they're going to do business with you. Like I said, it's very different in how we establish trust, but this is the way how trust is established here. I see what you're doing. I think you're reliable. I like your product. I like your services. You allowed me to experience that for free. Now I trust you. Now I feel comfortable doing business with you. Now, finally, there's one more thing that might also need some getting used to, and that is how to establish long-term business relationships, because you might not be able to. Business relationships and so-called friendships can be very close in the US as long as they're purpose-driven and we have something in common that we're working on. But if all of a sudden the common purpose we're working on is gone, well, the established trust and the familiarity we have built over maybe years will vanish. Not everybody's like that, but be prepared that it will happen to you more often than not. And this is, like I said, needs some getting used to, that often friendships, business friendships and relationships are built on a more temporary basis.
That's very hard for a Latin to understand, right?
Yes.
My husband is American, so he tried to train me a little bit too. He said the first thing that when he got out of college and his first job, they said, if you want a friend, buy a dog. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe in something like that. But of course, that is an extreme. He was just
Yes.
trying to be funny. But really, we always think that the person is our friend, and it's very hard for a Latin, and we have to learn how to navigate that. Mhm.
Be
Any other
prepared for the heartbreak.
I know. Your Mick. No, can you put your microphone?
Is it on now? Yes, sorry. In that respect, I would like to add something. Uh, the fact that you need to understand the difference between friendship and business here has a lot to do, especially when you are trying to sell something, and you need to learn that it is not personal if a client says no. And at the beginning, when you just come to the US and you feel that relationship is going beyond a business relationship and you get that no, you are heartbroken. So you need to navigate that difference in culture of how you sell and how you approach business and friendship. And there are business friendships that will last forever. I have many, but you need to understand when to apply that it is business versus when it is friendship.
Exactly. Aloysio, do you have any other question to Renata or Marisol?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I have a question to Renata. You don't have to answer, but I know this country was colonized by foreigners, right? That became Americans, and although they had most of them had the same language, and you know the whole story. Do you think that Americans in general are open to foreigners?
That's the question. Okay, so do I think you as Americans are open to foreigners? Well, again, there are many different cultural layers and layers of society. Now, I'm a language teacher, an intercultural coach, and a communication skills trainer. You can imagine the type of people I hang out with and that I know and I do business with. These tend to be people who are very open to foreigners and who are very open-minded and culturally aware and embracing and welcoming. But I do know very well that there are other people who are not. Now, like in every society, I think we have to distinguish between people who are and who are not. As far as business is concerned, how can you find people who are open to foreigners if that's more the question? Well, I would always recommend that you bring it down to the business level and to the level of what makes it worth it for them, because I know a ton of people who are not thrilled of working with foreigners, but they see the advantage and the benefit of doing international business. They are willing to stretch a little bit, just enough to do business with them. In private, they won't have nothing to do with them because that would be too much of a stretch, let's say. I was talking about this comfort zone earlier on. Some people don't want to stretch and don't want to widen their comfort zone. They just want to stay within what they feel absolutely comfortable with. And we just have to accept that some people want to just do things in their own particular way. But as if you want to do business with people who are not open to foreigners, because if you do business with people who are open, you won't have these issues. But if you want to do business with people who are not so open to foreigners, show them what the advantages are, what the benefits are, how it is good for their bottom line if they add that international element to their business, and keep it on that really just business level. And you'll see that you can even do business with people who are generally not so open to foreigners.
Yes, true. We see that all the time, right? That and now that diversity is so much something that we talk about with globalization and how important it is to accept everyone. I think that there's an economic side to that that might appeal. Yeah.
I think we always have to respect people's comfort zone, no matter what that is, our own comfort zone and the comfort zone of others. We need to venture out, explore, and see what people feel comfortable with, what creates fear or discomfort for them. And we have to just be respectful to anyone and say, okay, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, we don't go there. But is that something you'll be able to do or willing to do? We just have to figure out what people feel comfortable with, how far they want to go, what is within their comfort zone. And I think this is how we can determine how much business we can do with whom.
It's true. And when it comes to politeness, for example, Latins are they try to not hurt the other, so say in a way that it's better. Like, I feel that here in the United States, it's very direct. The person does not care if it's going to come across, will say no because of this, and sometimes even with a rude tone that, it's like, for us, it's a little it's not personal, as Marisol said. It's just the way very aggressive of doing business. Do you think there's something that we as Latins should adapt to the way that business is done here? Like, it's a very cutthroat society, like the wild capitalism. And, if the person has to throw you in the front of the bus to get a little more, they do. So
it's kind of interesting that you consider US Americans as very direct, and that is exactly a question of perception. Because if I look at US Americans from a British perspective, from a British perspective, I get the same idea. They're very direct. But if I look at Americans from a German perspective, Americans are too indirect. Can you believe that?
yeah.
Yes, and this is something I experienced growing up between Germany and England, because those two countries are very, very different in terms of directness and indirectness. So Germans tend to be extremely direct, and the British tend to be very indirect. And I think if you take to heart what I said earlier on, that you will be a successful communicator if you look beyond the what and you ask about the why. You will be much more comfortable with that situation. There's a funny saying I really like between the British and the Germans. They say the British and the Germans cannot communicate well with each other because the British are too polite to be honest, and the Germans are too honest to be polite. Now we can take the same situation and apply it, let's say, to Brazilians and US Americans. Maybe Brazilians are too polite to be honest, and maybe US Americans are too honest to be polite. Look at it this way. If you look beyond the what is, he just said, no, I don't want to do this. Give me another suggestion. This is what you hear. This is your what. You hear it and you're startled. But ask why. Say, what? Why is this person acting like this? Why is this person saying this? And the reason behind directness in communication is honesty, believe it or not. Very often I feel obliged to tell people what I think, because if I don't, if I embellish it, then I'm a liar, right? So very often people who are super direct feel that they would be lying if they didn't say it as it is. And this is also something we're getting preconditioned during our childhood and school years. This is how we're being trained in school. I mean, you as school kids grow up to hear from their teachers, stand up, speak your mind, and if you have nothing to say, sit down. This is how they're being taught. Whereas in other countries, they might say, before you speak, think of your environment, think of the impact of your words on the group, and then if you really want to speak, speak. But if you think it might harm anybody around you, reconsider your words. And we are being taught different things in school and by society, and we end up being the product of that education and that culture we grow up in. So whenever somebody throws you a curveball like that and you're stunned, you're like, whoa, that's shocking. breathe, stop, go back and say, why would this person do this? Or even if you feel like it's appropriate in that situation, go back and say, why would you think so? What made you say that? Start a dialogue and try to ask yourself why. The moment I started understanding why people from certain cultures do certain things, it was easier for me to understand and accept it.
No, fantastic. It's exactly that. I noticed that here you throw a question back usually, right? So what do you mean? But do you think that if we position ourselves on being on the same team, we are here to try to get the same result? So do you think that it helps, like showing that we are willing to do the best, so a lot of times people think that they're in different teams, like opposite sides. Do you feel that in the United States you have the team mentality, or no, here it's everyone by itself?
The United States is known to be a very individualistic culture. Gerd Hofstede is a linguist and a researcher, and he has done some important research on individualism versus group or culture or collectivism. And he has a website where you see that data, where you can compare countries. And if you compare countries on individualism versus collectivism, the US stands out as the one and only with the highest level of individualism. So you really have to bear that in mind, that the individual's well-being, the individual's success, and individual usually includes your in-group. It includes your family, and it can include your team or your company, that you go as a team, but then that team stands as an individual unit, and you don't care so much about the effect on other groups, other teams, other companies. You're in direct competition. So the idea of individualism and the pursuit of happiness, it's in the Constitution. Every US citizen has the right of the pursuit of happiness. And this is what individualism is driven by. You really have to see how important this is. And it's not egoism. Don't misunderstand it as egotistical behavior. Individualism means you have the right and the duty to be the best you can be. And once you look at the mindset and why people do it, yes, try to do the best you can be and apply this to yourself. So rather than saying, I have to compete with them, I'm not in the same team with them, be more individualistic. Allow yourself to say, I am the best. I am the best you can work with. I'm the best in my field. I give you something you don't have. I enrich your corporate culture, or I provide a service or a product that you need. And the diversity I bring to your team and the cultural knowledge that I have is exactly what you need. So I think what gives you that feeling of I don't quite fit in is because you're not applying the same level of self-confidence that they do. And you will see, as soon as you boast and brag and push up your self-confidence, they will react differently to you. And that's one thing I found out in my own little survey that I showed you in the presentation, that Brazilians often say about you as Americans that are so confident. Whoa. And it's really, if you build up that confidence, then it will change your perception of how the interaction with them is.
For sure, you have to be confident on what you do, right? You have to be the best and work for that and pursue. Marisol, would you have any question, any other?
I just wanted to say thank you to Renata. I see we're running out of time here, but the comment about assumptions being very dangerous, if you may say that, is on the money. I really believe if we already enter a relationship with all these preconceived notions and these assumptions and generalizations, we are at risk of missing a great opportunity. And we need to be, like Renata said, more open. Little things like what you mentioned about, I took notes about a perception about not being well educated, for Brazilians not being well educated, same as other Latin American countries in the same boat. One of those perceptions is about accent, which is really funny. If you have a French accent, you are like, oh my gosh, look at that beautiful French accent. But let's say you have a Hispanic, very strong accent, there are a lot of assumptions that happen right away about where you came from, your level of education, your instruction. So we just need to work a little bit on our side also to dissipate those assumptions and show the best that we have to offer, and also learn from that and not assume from the other side. Even among people from Latin America, Brazilians, because they speak Portuguese and they have also a very different culture than other countries in Latin America. There are differences and there are assumptions and perceptions among us. So we just need to work a little bit more on being open. And thank you for that reminder, Renata.
Thank you, Marisol.
We have very well-educated Latinos, and so yeah. So I guess that's the end of the show. Do you have anything else, Renata, that you would like to mention, or that's good?
I think we touched a lot of areas, and it's just very important to not feel that you need to change completely. I can't reinforce that often enough, that yes, you need to be knowledgeable and adapt to certain ways how things are done, but you can all do that in your own style and give it your own little twist on things. Since I've lived in different countries and even speak English with different accents, I have a British and I have an American accent, so I know very well how it feels, how people react to me if I speak with my British accent. So you want to switch and change a little bit so that you fit into the niche you want to fit in, but you have to maintain your own personality as much as possible. And you have to see how those qualities of being different is a benefit. You have to make it an asset and use it accordingly. And that is probably the core message to everyone. Learn, adapt, and be aware of what's going on, but don't think that you have to change completely. Maintain your own personality and your strengths as much as possible.
So thank you so much again. We will always be back on the first Thursday of each month with a subject of interest to our Brazilian Hispanic communities. So thank you so much. You really added like a lot to our show. And I hope that you will be back one day, because I don't think that we ended all the questions and all the, right? Like, thank you again, and success.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Aloysio. Thank you, Marisol. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.